I wonder if a lot of people sort of imagine that we're in a place that is the place that they want. They imagine that if you work hard, you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And I just like can't see that. It's not unreasonable for you to expect that if you have a family, you could buy a house to build wealth, you know? And I think a lot of people feel like that's not a reasonable expectation. And it really ought to be. You know, we have to have ways to improve ourselves.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come to win, we come to fly. This is where we make our dreams come to life. Welcome to Innovation City.
Welcome to Innovation City, a podcast featuring the innovators, creators, and disruptors who are changing the way that business happens in cities like Miami, Florida. And today's a really special day. I'm joined by my co-host, Leanne Buchanan.
Hey, everybody.
And we have with us Miss Annie Lord.
Hi. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Welcome. Nice to have you.
Welcome, Annie. So we were just talking beforehand, and for folks that don't know you, you are a Miami native, which is rare in Miami. It's a transplant transient city. And you're also the executive director of Miami Homes for All. We're going to talk a little bit about what you do in a moment, but first we want to get to know who you are and kind of what you're passionate about. So I know at least one thing that you're passionate about, but maybe tell us one fact that folks don't know about you.
Well, I love to sing. I'm raising 2 young kids right now with my husband, so I don't do as much of that as I used to, but I met my husband while I was singing in a cover band.
Whoa.
Which was
what kind of music?
Like 80s, 90s. It was
rock or pop?
Mostly rock because, you know, lends itself, right? But I think we performed Party in the USA a couple of times. I'm
you want to give it a shot right now?
Slightly embarrassed. Is the fun fact also like your greatest shame? Yeah, right? No, it was super fun, and the guys were all really great.
So what was the song that got everybody kind of like grooving?
Oh, well, I mean, it's the same. It's a karaoke song. It's Don't Stop Believing.
Journey.
I mean, it's Journey. It's just like, if you can nail that one, like, there's just nobody doesn't like that song. It's amazing.
I love it. I had no idea about this. So this is really fascinating. So, you know, you are well known for your experience in community development and looking at the intersection of kind of innovative approaches to the built environment and how it serves people. So talk to us a little bit about, you know, Miami Homes for All, how you came to that role, and what you've learned from it.
Yeah, so Miami Homes for All is primarily an advocacy and community engagement organization, and we also partner with academic institutions to conduct research that informs that advocacy and that engagement. And so I think just fundamentally the issue of housing and how that plays a role as the hub of somebody's well-being and health, right? You can't really hold down a job unless you've got a stable place to sleep, and you can't study unless you have a place to be when you're not at school. And how do you go to the doctor? It's just a fundamental, it's very high on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Mm-hmm. And so as I've been working in community development for the last 15 or so years, when you think about all the ways that you can impact people the most. For me, I think, education, especially starting at an early age, and then housing are really the 2 ways that I thought I could be the most impactful. And so that's really how I came into that work. And so when the position at Miami Homes for All opened up, I was really excited about it and lucky enough to get it. And so that's, and it was a way for me to come back to Miami. I was living in Dallas at the time, which was really good to me and my husband, but, we're both from here. We really wanted to move home, and this felt like a great way to, hopefully have a decent impact.
And so when we talk about housing security, there's so many periphery issues like housing stock, affordability, different approaches to homelessness, different approaches to how you subsidize and create opportunities. When we think about just this idea of housing security. What is one thing that you've learned through this work that may not be readily apparent from the surface?
Well, I think that fundamentally it's actually quite simple, which is not to negate anything that you've just said. All of those confounding factors do play really important roles, but there's a huge need in Miami, and it's very deep as well among people who are lower income. And so you're talking about a massive scale of problem for, you know, a certain subset of the population that does help to drive our economy, and that's 250,000 households. And that, so that, you know, you could imagine easily multiplying that times, you know, four people a household, that's 1 million people maybe who just live in Miami-Dade County, who are earning $35,000 a year or less, and who are spending more than they can afford for their home. So I guess fundamentally, for me, it's very simple. This is where the problem lies. And there are a lot of really great things that we can do to provide more housing and to create more supply to serve that particular subset of the population. But the biggest thing is going to be money. And so, like, if there's anything that I've taken away from this is lower income folks who do work, right? This is not just like folks who are elderly and on fixed income or disabled, right? This is a really big population, and we need more money. And that sounds, I think it would be easy for people to dismiss the money thing and be like, oh, well, this is impossible. Well, you know, it's not. This is about priorities. And that's a very important part of today's conversation, I think. Where are we spending our money in the public sector? Is it on the things that we prioritize the most? I think there's a lot of argument that right now we're not.
So one of the things that I think about when we look at the intersection of innovation and real pressing social issues is the definition of innovation. And you've heard me say this before, but it's a process that's designed to improve the human condition. And that is not a technology tool. It's not always, the latest gadget. It could be innovation in housing. So what's the most innovative thing that, where's there an opportunity for innovation in this space?
It's really funny because some of this is like not it's like not super sexy, right? So I was like really flattered that you wanted to talk about this on your podcast, because it's like it's sort of not rocket science. It's very like linear arithmetic, right? So where we can innovate is if we reduce the cost or we increase the resources. So we can reduce the cost by there are some innovative design, both in terms, techniques and materials. So just the way we build, right? Is there, more opportunity for like prefabrication or, sort of mass produced parts of a house, like kind of like a Sears house, we used to do this. And certainly creating, more eco-friendly homes ends up making them more affordable because you don't spend as much on the, your air conditioning and other utilities, and then you can add more resources that reduce the burden on ultimately either the homeowner or the renter, right? So I think on the resources side, this is a very good time for us to think, I think, a little more what you might have thought was radically. Even a couple of months ago, today feels not super radical. So something that's come up a lot is a tax in Florida, and in particular in Miami, a tax on vacant properties. So this would mean if you took very high value properties, right? Priced at $1 million or above, let's say, just in the city of Miami, if you put a 1% annualized tax on properties above that value, you could raise what is estimated to be $100 million a year. And you could contribute that to affordable housing to develop more units that are lower priced. $100 million is a lot of money. That's a significant, that's very meaningful dollars. I suppose that goes without saying, but sometimes you think about, big problems. You're like, no, this is impossible. And you're like, no, actually, if we did that every year, that would go a long way. So I think it's time for us to consider those kinds of innovations.
So $100 million, what can, because it's totally attainable, I would say, right? 1%, that's not too much. What can you do with that kind of money on an annual basis?
Well, you might say, so let me put that in perspective, right? That was just for the city of Miami, right? Where, you do have I think, arguably the highest property values in the county. But the city of Miami a couple years ago passed a $400 million bond for resiliency, $100 million of which was supposed to go to affordable housing and economic development. So if you think about that being like spread out over, let's say, a decade, and $100 million coming in every year, maybe for like a few years before you sort of see a market correction, right? So that's putting it kind of in perspective. But what could you build with that? I mean, it depends on the estimate. But if you were to back of the envelope, let's say it costs all in, costs you roughly $200,000 per door, per unit, right? So, oh my God, this is going to expose me as not a good mathematician, right? But that divide 100 million by that, it's not that many units, but ultimately what it does is you leverage other dollars that are already slated for this. So, I mean, you could you can make a real dent on the problem that we're facing right now with that kind of money.
And one of the things that we talk about in terms of, that Maslow's hierarchy is also the intersection of that with entrepreneurs. So a lot of people don't have the opportunity to be entrepreneurs because the rent's too high, or they may not have exposure, or they may not have opportunities to access capital. And so it'd be interesting. What are some of the most interesting proposals that you've seen to help distinct subsets of our community, like teachers or entrepreneurs or artists, and kind of how do you navigate that in your space?
Right. So I do think there are some really interesting proposals. So if you look at Bakehouse, Miami, right, there's a really interesting particular project in Wynwood that is for artists that would integrate studio space with affordable housing. So I think there's some really interesting kind of mixed use opportunities where you create communities of entrepreneurs or artists or, thinkers who live together. And, that sort of sounds kind of like utopian to me. That sounds really great. So I think there's some kind of exciting projects there that are targeting the fomenting of certain communities. So it's a very, I think that you could target that kind of model to a lot of different sorts of communities.
So I want to go back to this idea of vacancy. How big of a problem is vacancy in a city like Miami?
So, right, it's pretty big, actually. Some estimates put in, just the Brickell area, 40% vacancy. And you're talking about not vacant like 2 weeks out of the year. You're talking about like pretty much dark windows all year long. Maybe the owner comes in for vacation or is in and out. But, fundamentally a dark window. And you're looking at, almost half of those apartment units lying vacant. That's definitely taking stock away from the supply. I don't want to overstate that. You're talking about, especially at very high prices, you're not talking about a unit that's affordable to a teacher or a nurse or at home, medical aid, something like that, right? But nevertheless, it's like the demand for that has meant that developers have focused on that and haven't focused on building, I think at a lower price point.
What can we learn from startups and innovators and entrepreneurs that could be applied to your work?
I mean,
because you're around us a lot. We've done some pretty cool things together. So what can you take from that mindset, the entrepreneurial mindset, to kind of really stodgy issues like housing security and availability?
That's exactly the right word. I mean, not to get too gushy, but never say die. I think that's the thing. And also, like, what's the thing, you know, what's the vision, right? And I still have to work on that for sure. You know, I still am looking at the lack. You know, I'm focused on the deficit of the, you know, as framing the problem. But what's the place we envision, you know? And I was thinking about this morning, you know, I wonder if sometimes this is the most optimistic way of thinking about this problem we're in right now. But I wonder if a lot of people sort of imagine that we're in a place that is the place that they want. You know, like they imagine it's an equitable place. They imagine if you work hard, you know, this is common, right? They imagine that if you work hard, you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And I just like can't see that. So how do we imagine that in a realistic way where people are educated about the reality? And I think we're doing a lot of that as a universe, you know, as a country and I think possibly as a planet. So what does that vision look like given where we are today? And, you know, I do imagine a place where if you are working, you know, if you're working, it's not unreasonable for you to expect that if you have a family, you could buy a house to build wealth, you know? And I think a lot of people feel like that's not a reasonable expectation. And it really ought to be. You know, we have to have ways to improve ourselves.
Yeah, I think that the moment that we're in creates an interesting inflection point where we are revisiting systems and coming to the realization that perhaps the systems were not designed to be advantageous or to be beneficial or to be equitable to a lot of people. And so for me as an innovator, and we talk with so many innovators about the why, I think that this inflection point is a great opportunity to take what the innovation world would say is innovation by improvement or adding something different or looking at you know, cross-discipline approaches to just solving very entrenched challenging issues. But speaking of fun,
are we having that?
We are going to have fun.
I mean, I already am.
We have been. It's time for the lightning round.
Okay.
That's my favorite part.
Great. I'm excited. I'm ready. I schooled myself a little bit.
Yeah, just quick fired questions and answers. Am I
You wanna go
starting or
first?
you want to go first?
Après vous.
See, I don't even know what I'm reading. Here we go. What is most important to you?
Oh, my family. Is that, sorry,
No, that's
one word's
perfect.
cool? All right,
Yeah.
awesome.
Kind of like the perfect sandwich question. What is your perfect day?
You know, my kids and my husband and I go for these sort of like epic run scoot bikes, and we go to my in-laws and, you know, we like pick up fruit along the side of the road that falls, that's not stealing from someone's property, and we put it in our basket and then we keep going, and that like it's just, and we stop at the little fruit stand and get smoothies, and we go swimming. It is super fun. Perfect day.
What makes you lose track of time?
Listening to music, I think.
What is a defining moment in your life and how did it impact you?
I think taking the leap of faith to move back to Miami in 2008 when there was a recession, and I didn't quite know how to appraise that moment. And I was like, I'm gonna quit my job and I'm gonna break up with my boyfriend who was perfectly nice and, sublet my apartment. I'm just gonna move home because I'm pretty sure that family's my number one value, but I'm not totally sure, and I'm scared, but I'm gonna do it anyway. And it just turned out that if I was near my family, I could have nothing else going on in my life and I would be okay.
What can you do that you could not do a year ago?
I can wake up at 4:00 in the morning and just really work. I can work really hard at that hour. New limits.
Spoken like a true innovator. I'm all done.
Annie, thank you.
Thank you
How can
both.
people get in touch with Miami Homes for All, like the website, social media, your social?
MiamiHomesForAll.org, all spelled out. Social is with the number 4. And yeah, just reach out, and we're going to be putting out this plan for affordable housing for Miami-Dade County this coming week, and you can see it on our website.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Annie, for joining us. This has been a fun, fascinating conversation. I always learn a lot from you. And so I appreciate
Likewise.
you taking the time.
No, thank you both so much.
Thank you for listening to Innovation City. If you like this episode, you can find more episodes at innovationcity.co or anywhere where you watch or listen to podcasts. Please subscribe, rate, and review, and we'll see you next week.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come to win, we come to fly. This is where we make our dreams